Today, there are just 7,100 cheetahs left in the wild, down from an estimated 14,000 in 1975. The cheetah has been driven out of 91% of its historic range. The big cats once roamed nearly all of Africa and much of Asia.
We are estimating that there is a decline in cheetahs of about 2% annually. So that could mean that the cheetahs in Kenya might be below 600.
The International Union for Conservation of Nature has now classified the cheetah as endangered and is now officially on the red list of threatened species. The cheetah in Swahili is called duma. Kenya holds approximately 600 cheetahs, with over 75% residing on land outside of national parks and reserves. They face multiple human-caused threats, including habitat loss, retaliatory attacks from livestock owners, as well as poaching and the trafficking in skins and of young cubs. Cheetahs have been pushed out from 25% of their historic Kenyan range in the last 20 years. Cheetahs have solid spots across their whole body, which is yellow in color, and are different from a leopard, which has rosettes. Cheetahs also have a smaller head, white throat, and the very distinctive tear markings coming down from their eyes to the outside of their mouths. Nairobi, Kenya, the only capital city in the world that borders a national park. In the 80s and 90s, Nairobi National Park had a healthy population of big cats, especially cheetahs. But sadly, changes in their favorable environment caused them to disappear in less than 10 years. Today, there are only 1 or 2 cheetahs left. Mary Weisktra, an American cheetah scientist, heads up a Kenyan team trying to find out why cheetahs have disappeared while promoting the conservation of these graceful cats.
We started working in Kenya in the year 2001 to basically help the Kenya Wildlife Service to have a better understanding of the cheetah population, its status and the threats to the cheetah population. And we've conducted a national survey across the whole country between 2004 and 2006. All of that to help us better understand how cheetahs move across the country, how cheetahs live with people, and whether or not there is a future for cheetahs in Kenya.
For cattle rancher Michael Mbithi, the question is whether Kenya's future will manage to preserve the best of the past.
We came here when I was 8 years old, and I started walking around on foot when I was 12. And one of the biggest differences is the number of migratory animals that we get nowadays. We used to get elephants more often. I remember once we had rhino that came through. We used to get wild dogs almost annually. Lions used to be from varied ecosystems. We used to get the Nairobi Park lions who until just recently now can't come through. It's about 3 years now since they can't come through. Nowadays we get Amboseli lions. Migratory routes out of Nairobi National Park, unfortunately, are pretty much closed. Once in a while you get a few animals that get through, but it's really a gauntlet.
We categorized the land that the cheetah uses into 4 land use categories. One of those is subsistence farming, which is present in the Salama ecosystem. Another is commercial ranching, which is present in the Athi Kapiti region. And then we identified as protected areas, and finally as pastoral communities.
I'm a pastoralist. I live at the edge of Nairobi National Park, just outside Nairobi National Park. It's a very important area in terms of conservation. And there's all this wildlife that connects, that migrate from Nairobi Park to Athi Kapiti and even down to Amboseli. Actually, the major changes is the number of wildlife has declined, and also there's also all this infrastructure that has come up, the increase in human numbers outside here. And those major changes really brought so many changes even on the environment and the ecosystem. In a one way or another, they've contributed to decline in wildlife numbers.
In the past, this land was all contiguous for Nairobi National Park through Kitengela at the river, all the way down to Salama area, Sultan Hamud. It was one big chunk of land, and all the way to Oldonyo Sabuk. You find initially ranching societies like Lukenya, Drumville, Brima, The Wend. Now we also lost Malili, Kimakiu ranching. We lost Konza ranching. That in total is about 200,000 acres of land. There's also a lot of commercial speculation, especially with the ICT, which is right behind us, about 8 kilometers straight out. And a lot of people have come, looking for urban plots because of the promise of having a big technical city. The fever spread all around, basically not taking into account any of the environmental factors.
Moving from the Nairobi National Park through the Kajiado ecosystem and Ngata Rongai area where there's massive development, it makes it a big barrier for cheetahs to be able to be moving. But once you get into those pastoral communities that lead up to the Amboseli community, we know that there's a much higher population of cheetahs. The same thing goes for the Salama area where development is happening at a very rapid pace with the highway and the little subdivisions that are happening in there, and with the ICT being developed. The cheetahs have pretty much moved out of that system and have moved into the Athi-Kapiti and into the surrounding Maasai land. So obviously the biggest differences are the linear infrastructure. We have a lot more major roads where people travel at higher speeds. The biggest documented deaths that we've had to cheetahs outside of protected areas has been from road kills. So a lot of cheetahs have been hit by a car. Just in this section between Ismaili and Chumvi, the Machakos junction, we've had 18 cheetahs that have been hit by cars in the past 10 years.
Kenya's rapid development of highways and railroads is helping the country leap forward, but it's blocking the traditional migration routes for wildlife.
Recently, the SGR, which is also blocking a lot of the corridors for the animal movement. In the past, you couldn't possibly go into Nairobi National Park without seeing cheetahs. And also out in the Kajiado ecosystem, it was primarily pastoral communities and only small settlements. So the cheetahs could actually move quite freely between the Nairobi National Park and the Amboseli ecosystem. And the Salama and Athi-Kapiti area had resident cheetahs, but also this would be where those migrant cheetahs would pass by and exchange genetics, and some of them would change their minds and live in these areas. So the Athi-Kapiti and Salama ecosystem were quite important for that migratory corridor and the migration of genetics and keeping healthy populations. Today, however, people will go into the Nairobi National Park for a year or more at a time without even seeing a cheetah. And it's mainly because that corridor getting into the Nairobi National Park has been cut off.
The survival rate of baby cheetahs is only about 5%. So that means 95% of cheetahs die before they reach the age of 1 year. And that's historical, even before the human influence was so big.
But now that the human influence is so big, it makes it even more and more difficult for those cheetahs to survive in human-dominated landscapes.
And human development has made it hard for wildlife guides like Gordon Omondi to show cheetahs to all the people who come to Nairobi National Park to see them.
The last time I saw a cheetah was like 4 or 5 months ago. This was a cheetah which was quite shy. We saw it from a distance of about 300 meters. And when we tried to approach, it never liked our presence. So we gave it its space. And even many times when the guests ask me about cheetahs, I would tell them, yes, we've got cheetahs in the park, but they are very, very few. They are seldom seen. Since I came here, at least I've seen a little bit of a decline in wildlife, especially when it comes to cheetahs. In fact, we tend to see more leopards than cheetahs, even though leopards are the most shy and elusive of the cats. I think the reason could be because cheetahs need much more wider space. And if you look at the park, you know, animals used to migrate in and out in a very relaxed manner. But nowadays, lots of buildings have come up. So I think this kind of hampers the migration of most animals. And to me, it seems it has affected cheetahs more than any other cats.
I think the reason why cheetahs have declined is the ecological reason. And when we had the long rain of El Nino, and a good number of animals, most of the herbivores and even the lions and most of these cat families move away from the park for a very long time. And I think because lions and zebras know how to maneuver and come back to the park after the long rain, cheetahs never came back.
So, where did they go? It's early morning, 100 kilometers south of Nairobi National Park, and the Action for Cheetahs team are on the daily scout for cheetah tracks.
Every morning we have a patrol according to my section. We always do 4 patrols and 1 transect in our daily routine. The transects themselves starts from 7. We go checking tracks, checking the animals for the presence and the proof for if there is cheetahs or there are leopards. And one of the things that we do is to identify the tracks, the sighting of the animals, so that at least we have a proof of what is happening in these farms.
We were first called to work in this area in 2005 when there was a mother cheetah who was attacking some livestock around the Stanley Ranch, which is on the other side of the Salama community. So we requested that instead of moving her, we could put a radio collar on her. We could monitor her impact on the community, look at what happened to the 5 cubs because they were nearly subadult, but also we could try to find out how many other cheetahs were in this area.
In the neighboring Lisa Ranch, Michael Mbidi is tracking a healthy population of cheetahs as well. It seems that this is where the cheetahs that left Nairobi National Park may have re-established themselves.
Comparing that, Nairobi National Park probably has 1 or 2 cheetahs. In this area, there are times when we have baby booms between Lisa and Kapiti and New Astra. And we have anything up to 30 cheetahs. The cheetahs here are quite shy. They're not used to vehicles, they're not used to people. But, you know, they are there and we do see them. The other thing is that these cheetahs also move around quite a bit. They go south into Isinya and past Isinya into the woodland area, Mashuru, Selengei. Some go towards Kajiado, down the greater Kajiado Valley, all the way to Longido. Remember we had one cheetah that was collared in Salama that went all the way to Tanzania. Umeona moja mbili inakuanga kama ngapi?
Siku nyingine umeona moja. Na siku nyingine baada ile miezi inapita umeona 2.
Umeona 2. Okay, umeiona ile kuna watoto? Bado.
Unaona watoto.
So we've just found some cheetah tracks on the road near the hill. As you can see, it's quite a big one. Probably a male, and there are actually 2 of them when you look around. You see we got the tracks here, very clear. This guy was just walking on the road. Big male, quite heavy. You can see how his tracks just sink into the soft soil. Cheetah tracks are very distinct. You can't miss them. They're just like lion tracks. Very distinct. So this tree is in Lisa Ranch. It's one of our favorite trees because it's a cheetah marking post for all the cheetahs in this area. And it's pretty easy to see the evidence because there's a lot of poop. See all the poop on the ground. This is mostly the males who come and mark. The females will also come and mostly urinate. And if you look up the tree, you can also see the diarrhea looking feces up there and the scratches. There are lots of scratches on this tree. We think it's a kind of communication center because we have found very many different cheetahs, not just one. And it's used by cheetahs who have home ranges that interconnect right here. So what we're planning on doing is setting up a camera trap. So just securing our Python cable. Make sure we have a camera when we come back tomorrow. And hopefully we get some cheetahs overnight.
After a few nights, Michael's trap camera captured footage of a male cheetah marking the tree.
In the last 3 years, I've personally seen a very big increase in the number of cheetahs who are having cubs, successfully raising those cubs and releasing them. And the number of cheetahs we're having in the area. Because we would go 6 months without seeing a cheetah, now we rarely go a week without seeing a cheetah. But they're there. And you can see from the camera traps and the tracks on the roads that you're talking about very many different cheetahs.
In the first National Cheetah Survey, we estimated that there was between 1,000 and 1,400 cheetahs in Kenya. And we looked at those corridors of movement of those cheetahs and where those populations were pocketed. In the next national survey that we're beginning now, in addition to doing some of the similar interviews and game counts and assessment of prey base, we're also going to be looking for cheetah fecal material. And from that fecal material, we are actually going to use dogs to help us find it because they have much better noses than people do. And then we take that into the lab at Kenya Wildlife Service where we can look at the diet of the cheetahs, we can look at the genetics of the cheetahs, we can look at the health and even the reproductive status.
Scat detection dogs will identify samples that will be used to determine which populations breed with each other and where conservation efforts can prevent population isolation.
And that's a really big part of understanding how we should manage a cheetah population for the future. Because if those genetics are starting to show big signs of inbreeding, we actually have to change our management style in order to look at that as how we can physically help connect the genetics between the pocketed populations.
One of the biggest failures in Kenya is the fact that a lot of people do not know the reality about wildlife and conservation. I've met and heard from many people who think that Kenya's wildlife resides inside national parks and reserves, and apparently it's fenced in, and whenever there's a human-wildlife conflict issue, an animal has run away from some zoo of sorts. The truth is actually that over 70% of our wildlife is found outside parks and reserves. It's found in community land, private land, government land, outside. And this wildlife lives with people on a daily basis. People had their cattle, for example, in this landscape. They find lions as a daily occurrence. They find hyenas as a daily occurrence. I have hyenas and cheetahs going by my house, outside the window, every day. That's normal. This is where they belong. This is where they live.
We coexist with them because since the beginning we found them here. And we have herdsmen who herds the animals during the day and they make sure that they are there. But no lion, no cheetah or hyena should be killed. They are there, it's their place, it's their right.
If there is a predator that's coming to your boma, or if there is a predator that is attacking livestock in the field, contacting those of us who work in conservation of carnivores, finding out what kind of elements can be put into place to prevent it. An example here in the Machakos and Makueni area, when we first began doing this research, we found that a lot of the livestock were being attacked during the day as they went to water points. So developing a network of communication for people to be able to say, the cheetahs are in this area, Chungu and Mbuzi, don't use this path, or possibly to clear some of the paths so that the goats aren't wandering off into the bush where the cheetah can be opportunistic. Having good vigilance as a herder. A lot of times either children or old men are the ones who are assigned to watch over the goats and the sheep during the day, making sure that whoever is assigned to take care of the goats and the sheep are being very vigilant to the presence of the other predators.
Wildlife in our country facing a lot of challenges, but I think there is hope because one, people are more aware now that conservation is an economic, wildlife is an economic resource in our country, that people can utilize wildlife to generate income through tourists and do ecotourism project, through conservation, and like some of the program out here in Kitengela, the lease program, where people are benefiting, getting some money so they don't fence their land and allow free movement of wildlife in and outside the park.
Cheetahs and wildlife, basically, this is our heritage. And I'd like to see them, my children, and all generations, to find them. Not basically just seeing them on photos or seeing them on cameras. I want them to see with their eyes that this is a cheetah.
I think conservation agenda should be a foremost thing in our political system, and also our school kids should be taught conservation from an earlier age in their schools. They should be visiting these parks more and more often so as to create awareness, because we do not want a future whereby stories will be told that there were once animals like cheetahs, elephants, like rhinos.
Kenya has one of the largest connected populations of cheetahs right now, and that connectivity is very important for the future of cheetahs. So as landscape level development is happening, the biggest thing that can be done to protect cheetahs is to make sure that those corridors where those cheetahs can move still exist. Maintaining those and doing sustainable development. That comes from both a local level and from an administrative level. From the government having an understanding as they're making planning for future development, which is very important in Kenya, that if we don't maintain those corridors where these animals can move and we get them into these pocketed populations, we're not going to have them in the future.